The afternoon sun was starting to dip lower in the sky when Officer Derek Mitchell noticed the silver sedan ahead of him. He'd been patrolling this neighborhood for almost 6 years now, and he knew every street corner like the back of his hand. The car wasn't speeding or swerving. It was just there, but something about it caught his attention. Maybe it was the out-of-state plates, or maybe he was just bored after a slow shift. Either way, he decided to follow it for a bit. After tailing the vehicle for about 2 blocks, Derek flicked on his lights. The familiar red and blue glow reflected off the sedan's rear window. The car smoothly pulled over to the curb without any drama. No sudden moves, no trying to speed away. Professional, Derek thought. That's when he noticed the taillight. The right one looked a bit dim. Perfect. That was all the reason he needed. Derek grabbed his citation book and stepped out of his patrol car. He adjusted his belt, straightened his uniform, and walked toward the driver's side with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. As he approached, he could see through the window that the driver was a woman, probably in her 40s, wearing a navy blue blazer. Her hands were already on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, visible and calm. He tapped on the window with 2 knuckles. The woman pressed the button and the window slid down smoothly. She looked up at him with neutral, steady eyes. No fear, no attitude, just waiting. "Good afternoon," Derek said, though his tone suggested it was anything but good. "License and registration, please." The woman nodded slightly. "May I ask why you pulled me over, officer?" Derek felt a small flicker of irritation. They always wanted to know why. Like it mattered. Like they had a right to question him. He shifted his weight and crossed his arms. His citation book pressed against his chest. "I'll ask the questions here, ma'am. License and registration." The woman didn't argue. She reached slowly toward her glove compartment, making sure her movements were visible. Derek watched her carefully, his hand instinctively hovering near his belt. She pulled out her registration, then retrieved her wallet from her purse and handed both items through the window. Derek took them and glanced down at the license. Maya Chen, age 42. He looked at the address, then back at her car, then at her. Something about the whole situation felt off to him, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. She was too calm, too composed. "Most people got nervous when they saw those lights in their rearview mirror. You know why I stopped you?" he asked, even though she'd already asked him that question. "You haven't told me yet," Maya replied evenly. Derek's jaw tightened. "Your taillight's out. Right side." Maya glanced at her side mirror, though she couldn't see the back of her own car from where she sat. "I wasn't aware of that. Thank you for letting me know." Her tone was polite, but somehow it rubbed Derek the wrong way. It was too perfect, too measured. Like she was reading from a script. He looked past her into the car and noticed an expensive leather briefcase on the passenger seat. Designer brand, probably cost more than his weekly paycheck. His eyes narrowed. "Nice briefcase," he said, not bothering to hide the edge in his voice. "What do you do for work?" Maya turned her head slightly, following his gaze to the briefcase, then looked back at him. "Is that relevant to a traffic stop?" There it was again. That calm, almost robotic politeness that made Derek feel like she thought she was better than him. He dealt with plenty of rich people in this neighborhood, people who drove their expensive cars and lived in their fancy houses, and thought the rules didn't apply to them. This woman had that same energy. "I'm just making conversation," Derek said, his voice getting a bit sharper. "You got a problem with that?" "Not at all, officer. I'm just wondering if we can keep this focused on the reason for the stop." Derek felt his face getting warm. He was the one in uniform. He was the one with the badge, and this woman was sitting there in her fancy car with her fancy briefcase, acting like she was in charge of the situation. He glanced at his watch, then back at her. That's when he noticed the phone. It was mounted on her dashboard, angled perfectly to capture both of them, and the little red light in the corner was on. "Is that thing recording?" Derek asked, pointing at the phone. "Yes," Maya said simply. "It's my right to record this interaction." Derek's irritation flared into something closer to anger. "I need you to turn that off." "I'd prefer not to," Maya replied, her tone still maddeningly calm. "I'm within my legal rights to record a traffic stop." "It's interfering with police business," Derek said, knowing even as he said it that it didn't make much sense. But he didn't like being recorded. It made everything feel like a test, like he had to watch every word, and he definitely didn't like this woman telling him what her rights were. "I'm not interfering with anything," Maya said. "I'm sitting in my car with my hands visible, being completely cooperative." Derek stared at her for a long moment. She stared back, unwavering. He could feel the situation slipping away from him somehow. Could feel the control he usually had during these stops evaporating. This woman wasn't scared of him. She wasn't intimidated, and that bothered him more than he wanted to admit. "Step out of the vehicle," Derek said suddenly. Maya blinked. "Excuse me?"
I said step out of the vehicle, now. May I ask why?
"Because I'm telling you to." Derek's hand moved to rest on his citation book with more force than necessary, making a small slapping sound. "And I don't have to explain myself to you." Maya sat perfectly still for a moment. Derek could see her thinking, calculating. Then slowly she unbuckled her seatbelt. She opened the door and stepped out onto the sidewalk. She was shorter than he'd expected, maybe 5'4", but she carried herself like someone much taller. She stood with her hands loosely at her sides, waiting. Derek walked around her, looking her up and down like he was inspecting a suspect. "Where are you coming from today?" "Am I required to answer that for a broken taillight?" Maya asked. The way she said it, so calm and factual, made Derek want to throw the citation book at her car. "You can answer my questions, or this is going to take a lot longer than it needs to." "I understand you're doing your job, officer," Maya said, "but I'd like to exercise my right to remain silent regarding questions that aren't related to the traffic violation." Derek felt his face flush red. Exercise her right to remain silent? Who did this woman think she was? This wasn't some courtroom drama. This was a simple traffic stop, and she was turning it into a federal case. "You got something to hide?" Derek asked, stepping closer to her. "Not at all," Maya replied. "I simply know my rights." Those 4 words hung in the air between them. Derek had heard them before, usually from people who'd been pulled over one too many times, people who'd learned the hard way what cops could and couldn't do. But coming from this woman in her business clothes with her expensive car, it felt different. It felt like a challenge. Derek pulled his radio from his belt. "This is Unit 12 requesting backup at the corner of Maple and 5th. Maya's expression didn't change, but Derek thought he saw something flicker in her eyes. Surprise, maybe? Or concern? Good, let her sweat a little. "Copy that, Unit 12, the dispatcher's voice crackled through. "Sending Unit 7 to your location." Derek clipped the radio back onto his belt and looked at Maya with satisfaction. "We're going to wait here until my partner arrives. Maybe you'll feel like being more cooperative then." Maya said nothing. She just stood there, hands at her sides, face neutral. And somehow that silence felt louder than any argument she could have made. The minutes ticked by slowly. Maya stood on the sidewalk, her back straight, her breathing steady. She'd been in uncomfortable situations before, plenty of them. But this one had a particular edge to it. She could see Derek pacing near his patrol car, checking his phone, glancing at her every few seconds like she might suddenly bolt. The traffic stop had already lasted 15 minutes for a broken taillight. That alone told her everything she needed to know about where this was headed. She thought about her morning, the inspection at the mechanic's shop where they'd checked everything on her car, including all the lights. The receipt was still in her glove compartment, time-stamped at 9:30 that morning. She thought about the meeting she'd just left, the one where she'd spent 3 hours reviewing complaint files and incident reports. She thought about the folder sitting in her passenger seat marked "Confidential" in red letters. And she thought about the irony of this moment, though irony didn't quite capture the weight of it. Derek walked back over to her, that same swagger in his step. "So," he said, stopping a few feet away with his arms crossed, "you want to tell me what's in that briefcase?" Maya kept her eyes forward. "My work materials." "What kind of work materials?" "Documents, papers, the kind of things people keep in briefcases." Derek's mouth pressed into a thin line. "You're being deliberately vague." "I'm being appropriately private," Maya corrected gently. "My work documents aren't relevant to a traffic violation." "I'll decide what's relevant," Derek shot back. Maya didn't respond. She'd learned a long time ago that silence could be more powerful than any argument. Let people fill the quiet with their own assumptions, their own frustrations. Derek was doing exactly that, getting more agitated with every passing second that she didn't give him what he wanted. A second patrol car pulled up behind Derek's vehicle. The door opened and another officer stepped out, younger than Derek, maybe early 30s. He had the look of someone who was still trying to figure out his place in the job. He approached with a neutral expression, taking in the scene with quick, assessing eyes. "Hey, Derek," the younger officer said. "What's going on?" Traffic stop, Derek replied, not taking his eyes off Maya. Drivers being uncooperative. The younger officer, whose name tag read Thompson, looked at Maya. She was standing calmly on the sidewalk, hands visible, not arguing or resisting. She didn't look uncooperative. She looked patient. Thompson glanced back at Derek with a question in his eyes. What was the violation? Thompson asked. Broken taillight, Derek said. Thompson walked to the back of Maya's sedan and crouched down, examining both taillights. He stood back up, his brow furrowed. Derek, both lights look fine to me. Derek's face flushed. The right one was dim when I first pulled her over. Thompson said nothing, but Maya could see the doubt in his expression. She'd seen that look before, on officers who knew something wasn't right but weren't sure if they should speak up. The unspoken code of loyalty. The pressure not to question a fellow officer in front of a civilian. She wondered which way Thompson would lean. Derek seemed to sense the doubt too, and it made him more aggressive. He walked closer to Maya's car, peering through the windows. What's in that folder there? The one marked confidential? Maya followed his gaze. The folder was sitting on her passenger seat, partially visible. Work documents, she said again. You keep saying that. What kind of work? The kind that's protected by employment confidentiality. Derek laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's convenient. You know, when people have nothing to hide, they don't usually hide behind legal jargon. I'm not hiding behind anything, officer. I'm simply exercising my constitutional rights. Your constitutional rights, Derek repeated, his voice mocking. You sound like a lawyer. Maya said nothing. Let him think what he wanted to think. Derek turned to Thompson. I'm thinking we should do a more thorough search. Something about this whole situation doesn't sit right with me. Thompson shifted his weight uncomfortably. Search for what? It's a traffic stop, Derek. I don't like her attitude. She's being evasive. She's being quiet, Thompson said carefully. That's not the same thing. Derek shot him a look that could have melted steel. Are you questioning my judgment? Thompson held up his hands. I'm just saying, we pulled her over for a taillight that doesn't appear to be broken, and she's been cooperative. She hasn't refused anything you've actually asked her to do. She refused to answer my questions. Questions about her work and her personal business, Thompson pointed out, which she doesn't have to answer. Maya remained silent during their exchange, but internally she was taking notes. Thompson was uncomfortable with this situation. That was good. That meant there was at least one officer here who still had some sense of proper procedure. Derek turned back to Maya, his frustration barely contained. I'm going to call in a K-9 unit. Let's see how you feel about your rights when we've got a dog sniffing around your car. Maya's expression didn't change. You're welcome to do that, officer. Though I should inform you that detaining me for an extended period to wait for a drug dog when you have no reasonable suspicion of drug activity would be a violation of my Fourth Amendment rights. Derek's eyes went wide. Oh, now she's a constitutional scholar too. What are you, some kind of lawyer? I didn't say that. But you know an awful lot about the law for someone who just got pulled over for a traffic violation. Being informed isn't a crime. Derek pulled out his phone, his hands shaking slightly with anger. He scrolled through his contacts, presumably looking for the K-9 unit number. Thompson walked over to Maya, his expression apologetic. Ma'am, he said quietly, I apologize for the extended stop. If you could just be patient a little longer, we'll get this sorted out. Maya looked at him for a moment. Officer Thompson, this traffic stop has now lasted 25 minutes. I haven't been issued a citation. I haven't been arrested. I haven't been told I'm free to go. At what point does this become unlawful detention? Thompson opened his mouth, then closed it. He knew she was right. The Supreme Court had been clear about this. You couldn't extend a traffic stop indefinitely without reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. A broken tail light that may or may not actually be broken wasn't reasonable suspicion of drug trafficking. Derek, Thompson called over. Maybe we should just write the citation and let her go. This is taking a long time for a minor violation. I'll decide when she goes, Derek snapped. He was still scrolling through his phone, his face getting redder by the minute. Maya glanced at her own phone, still mounted on the dashboard, still recording. The red light blinked steadily. Every word, every action, every illegal extension of this stop was being captured in high definition. She wondered if Derek had forgotten about it, or if he was so confident in his authority that he simply didn't care. A black SUV turned onto the street, moving slowly. Maya noticed it immediately, though she tried not to let her expression change. The vehicle pulled up behind Thompson's patrol car and stopped. The driver's door opened. Agent Rodriguez stepped out. She was in her late 40s, wearing a sharp charcoal suit and carrying herself with the kind of authority that came from 2 decades with the FBI. She surveyed the scene with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen 1,000 traffic stops go wrong in 1,000 different ways. Derek looked up from his phone, his irritation at another interruption plain on his face. "This is a police matter. You need to move along." Agent Rodriguez pulled out her credentials and held them up. "Special Agent Rodriguez, FBI. I'm going to need to know what's going on here." Derek's expression shifted from irritation to confusion. "FBI for a traffic stop?" "That's what I'm wondering," Rodriguez said, walking closer. "What started as a simple traffic violation seems to have turned into something much more complicated." She looked at Maya, then back at Derek. "How long has this stop been going on?" "About half an hour," Thompson said before Derek could answer. Rodriguez's eyebrows went up. "Half an hour for a broken taillight?" "The driver has been uncooperative," Derek said defensively. "Uncooperative how?" Rodriguez asked. "Has she refused to provide identification?" "No," Derek admitted. "Has she refused to step out of the vehicle when asked?" "No, but has she been verbally abusive or physically threatening?" "She's been evasive," Derek said, the words sounding weak even to his own ears. Rodriguez looked at Maya again, really looked at her this time. Maya stood there in her business attire, hands at her sides, calm and professional. She didn't look like someone who'd been uncooperative. She looked like someone who'd been standing on a sidewalk for 30 minutes wondering when she'd be allowed to leave. "Officer," Rodriguez said, turning back to Derek, "do you know who you've pulled over?" Derek's face showed confusion mixed with growing concern. "Some woman with an attitude problem." "Why, is she somebody?" Rodriguez walked over to Maya. "Inspector General Chen, are you all right?" The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't quite exploded yet. Derek's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, disbelief, understanding, horror. "Inspector, what?" he managed to say. Thompson took a step backward, his eyes wide. He looked at Maya with sudden recognition. He'd seen her photo in the department-wide email that had gone out 2 weeks ago. The new Inspector General for the State Police Department. The person responsible for investigating police misconduct and ensuring accountability. The person who literally had the authority to end careers. And Derek had just spent 30 minutes treating her like a criminal. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Derek stood frozen, his phone still in his hand, his mouth slightly open. Thompson had gone pale, taking another step back like distance might somehow protect him from what was about to happen. Agent Rodriguez stood beside Maya, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp and assessing. Maya finally spoke, her voice still calm but carrying more weight now. "Officer Mitchell, I think we need to have a conversation about how this traffic stop has been conducted." Derek's mouth moved, but no sound came out at first. When he finally found his voice, it came out higher than usual. "Inspector, I was just what?" Maya asked. "Just doing your job?" "Yes." Derek latched onto that phrase like a drowning man grabbing a rope. "Exactly. I was just doing my job. You had a broken taillight and I pulled you over. Standard procedure." Maya tilted her head slightly. "Officer Thompson, could you check my taillights again, please?" Thompson walked to the back of the car like he was walking to his own execution. He examined both lights carefully, even asking Derek to turn on the vehicle's lights remotely using the keys. Both taillights blazed perfectly bright. He straightened up and met Derek's eyes. "They're both working fine, Derek, both of them." Derek's face had progressed from red to something closer to gray. It must have been a loose connection. "It was flickering when I first saw it, I swear." Maya reached into her car through the still-open window and pulled something from the glove compartment. She held it up. It was a receipt, printed on the official letterhead of Mike's Auto Service. "This is from my inspection this morning at 9:30. 3.5 hours ago. The mechanic checked everything, including all lights. They documented that all vehicle lighting systems were functioning properly. Would you like to see it?" Derek stared at the receipt like it was a snake. He didn't reach for it. He couldn't seem to form words. Agent Rodriguez stepped forward. "Inspector Chen, Before we continue, I think Officer Thompson should know that your office and the FBI have been coordinating on a joint investigation into this precinct. That's why I'm here. We've been reviewing complaint patterns and stop data for the past 6 months. Thompson's eyes went wide. He looked at Derek, then at Maya, then back at Rodriguez. An investigation into what? Discriminatory policing practices, Rodriguez said plainly. Multiple complaints have been filed about officers in this precinct conducting pretextual stops, particularly targeting women and minorities, extended detentions, illegal searches, abuse of authority. She paused. Your partner's name has come up 17 times in the complaint files. Derek found his voice again. Those complaints were investigated. They were all dismissed. Dismissed by your sergeant, Maya said quietly, who, coincidentally, is also under investigation for failure to properly document and address misconduct complaints. She looked at Derek steadily. I spent my morning reading those files, all 17 of them. The patterns were very clear. Derek's hands were shaking now. He shoved them in his pockets to hide it. This is ridiculous. I pull over plenty of people. Men, women, all kinds of people. I don't discriminate. Your traffic stop data tells a different story, Maya said. She wasn't being cruel about it, wasn't rubbing it in. She was just stating facts like she was reading from a report, which in a way she was. Over the past 2 years, 73% of your stops involved either women or people of color. The average duration of those stops was 19 minutes. For white male drivers, the average was 6 minutes. That's just coincidence, Derek protested. Different situations require different amounts of time. Maybe, Maya agreed. That's why we look at patterns rather than individual cases. But then there are the other factors. The questions unrelated to traffic violations, the request to search vehicles without probable cause, the threats to call K9 units, the extended detentions. She gestured around them. Much like what happened here today. Thompson spoke up, his voice shaky. Inspector, I want to be clear that I just arrived. I didn't know what was going on when I got the call for backup. Maya looked at him. Officer Thompson, you arrived approximately 15 minutes ago. In that time, what did you observe? Thompson swallowed hard. He knew this was a test, but it was also a chance. A chance to be honest, to be on the right side of this. I observed a traffic stop that had already been going on for a while. Officer Mitchell said the driver was being uncooperative, but when I got here, she was just standing calmly on the sidewalk. She hadn't refused any lawful orders. She was just quiet. And the taillight? Maya prompted. Both lights were working when I checked them. Did you inform Officer Mitchell of this? Yes, ma'am. And what was his response? Thompson hesitated. This was his partner. They rode together, had meals together, covered for each other. But looking at Derek now, seeing the panic in his eyes, Thompson realized something important. Derek wouldn't have covered for him. Derek would have thrown him under the bus without a second thought if it meant saving his own skin. He said it must have been flickering before, Thompson said. Then he said he wanted to do a more thorough search of the vehicle. He mentioned calling a K9 unit. Based on what probable cause? Rodriguez asked. Thompson shook his head. There wasn't any. I told him it was just a traffic stop and we should probably just write the citation and let her go. He disagreed. Maya nodded slowly. Thank you for your honesty, Officer Thompson. She turned back to Derek. Officer Mitchell, I want to be very clear about something. When I got pulled over today, I thought it was a mistake, an honest error. Maybe you genuinely thought you saw something wrong with my taillight. These things happen. Derek's face showed a flicker of hope. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Maybe she was going to let it go. But then, Maya continued, you started asking questions that had nothing to do with a traffic violation. You commented on my briefcase. You asked about my work. You made assumptions about who I was based on what you saw. And when I politely declined to answer questions I wasn't legally required to answer, you became hostile. I wasn't hostile, Derek said weakly. You ordered me out of my vehicle without cause. You threatened to detain me for a K9 search without any evidence of criminal activity. You called for backup when I exercised my constitutional rights. You've now kept me here for 35 minutes without issuing a citation or telling me I'm free to go. Maya's voice remained level, but there was steel underneath it. How would you characterize that behavior, officer? Derek had no answer. He looked at the ground, at his patrol car, at anything but Maya's eyes. Agent Rodriguez pulled out a small notebook. Officer Mitchell, I need to inform you that everything that's happened here today has been recorded. She gestured to the phone still mounted on Maya's dashboard. That device has been capturing audio and video of this entire interaction. Additionally, your patrol car's dashboard camera has also been recording. Derek's head snapped up. His dashboard camera. He'd completely forgotten about it. Every word, every action, every illegal extension of the stop was documented from multiple angles. We'll be reviewing both recordings as part of our investigation, Rodriguez continued. We'll also be pulling the GPS data from your patrol car to verify the timeline of events, and we'll be interviewing Officer Thompson about what he witnessed. Derek looked like he might be sick. Investigation? What investigation? I just pulled someone over for a traffic violation. You pulled over the Inspector General of the State Police, Maya said quietly. The person whose job it is to investigate exactly this kind of behavior. The person who, coincidentally, was returning from a meeting about implementing new accountability measures for traffic stops. She let that sink in for a moment. If you had treated me with basic respect and professionalism, this would have been over in 5 minutes. I would have gotten a citation for a taillight that isn't actually broken. I would have shown you my inspection receipt, you would have apologized for the error, and we both would have gone on with our days. But instead, Rodriguez picked up, you turned it into a case study of everything that's wrong with pretextual policing. You profiled her based on her appearance. You asked invasive questions. You retaliated when she asserted her rights. You threatened illegal searches. You called for unnecessary backup. And you did all of this while being recorded, to the one person in the state who has the authority to do something about it. The weight of what he'd done was finally settling on Derek like a physical thing. His career was over. He knew it. Everyone standing there knew it. The question wasn't whether he'd lose his job. The question was whether he'd face criminal charges, civil lawsuits, or both. Thompson cleared his throat nervously. Inspector Chen, if I may ask, what happens now? Maya looked at him, then at Derek, then at Rodriguez. Now, Officer Mitchell needs to either complete this traffic stop properly or inform me that I'm free to go, because anything else is unlawful detention, and I think we've had enough unlawful behavior for one day. Derek's hands came out of his pockets. They were still shaking. You're free to go. Without a citation? Maya asked. Without a citation, Derek confirmed, his voice barely above a whisper. Maya walked to her car door. She paused before getting in and looked back at Derek one more time. Officer Mitchell, I want you to understand something. This isn't personal. This isn't about revenge or ego or teaching you a lesson. This is about accountability. This is about making sure that the people who are given badges and guns and authority over others use that authority responsibly. She opened her door and slid into the driver's seat. My office will be contacting you within 48 hours. I suggest you speak with your union representative. She started the engine. Both taillights glowed bright red, perfect and unbroken. As Maya pulled away from the curb and drove off, Derek stood on the sidewalk watching her go. Agent Rodriguez was already on her phone calling someone. Thompson stood there looking like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. Derek's phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his sergeant. Need to see you in my office now. Word traveled fast. His world was already collapsing. Derek sat in his patrol car, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles had gone white. Thompson had left 5 minutes ago, mumbling something about needing to file his report. Agent Rodriguez had driven off in her black SUV, phone still pressed to her ear. And Derek was alone with the reality of what had just happened. The text from his sergeant glowed on his phone screen. Need to see you in my office now. 3 words that might as well have been a death sentence. Derek knew what was coming. He'd seen it happen to other cops over the years. The administrative leave, the investigation, the way everyone at the station would suddenly avoid eye contact, the whispers in the break room. He started the engine and drove toward the precinct, his mind racing through everything that had happened. How could he have known? The woman was just driving a regular car, wearing regular clothes. There was no way to tell she was the new Inspector General. No way to know that pulling her over would be the biggest mistake of his career. But even as he thought it, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered the truth. It shouldn't have mattered who she was. He should have treated her with respect regardless. He should have done his job professionally, whether she was the Inspector General or a waitress or a teacher or anyone else. That was the point, wasn't it? That's what Maya Chen had been trying to tell him before she drove away. The precinct came into view. Derek pulled into the parking lot and sat there for a moment, engine idling. Through the windows, he could see officers moving around inside. His colleagues, his brothers and sisters in blue. How many of them already knew what happened? How many had already heard about Derek Mitchell pulling over the new IG and treating her like a criminal? His phone rang. His sergeant again. Derek answered. "Where are you?" Sergeant Williams demanded. "Parking lot. Get in here. Now." The line went dead. Derek climbed out of his patrol car and walked toward the building. Each step felt heavier than the last. Inside, the usual noise of the precinct seemed muted. Or maybe that was just his imagination. He walked past the front desk, past the holding cells, down the hallway to the administrative offices. Sergeant Williams's door was open. Derek knocked anyway. "Sit," Williams said, not looking up from his computer screen. Derek sat. The chair felt uncomfortable, like it was designed to make people squirm. Williams clicked his mouse a few times, then turned the monitor so Derek could see it. It was an email, time-stamped 40 minutes ago, from the Inspector General's office. The subject line read, "Incident Report, Officer Derek Mitchell, badge number 4127. Want to tell me what happened out there?" Williams asked. Derek tried to find the words. "I pulled someone over for a broken taillight. Things got complicated." "Complicated," Williams repeated. "That's one word for it. The Inspector General's office says you conducted an unlawful traffic stop, made discriminatory comments, threatened an illegal search, and detained someone for 35 minutes without cause." "That sound about right?" "It wasn't like that," Derek protested. "The taillight was broken, or I thought it was, and she was being difficult." Williams leaned back in his chair. "Derek, I'm going to be straight with you. I just spent the last 20 minutes on the phone with the chief. The chief spent the last hour on the phone with the state attorney general. This isn't going away. What does that mean?" "It means you're on administrative leave effective immediately." "Badge and gun right now." Derek felt his stomach drop. He'd known it was coming, but hearing the words made it real. He unclipped his badge from his uniform and set it on Williams's desk. Then his service weapon, his extra magazine, his pepper spray, his cuffs, all the tools that had made him feel powerful just hours ago. "The IG's office is requesting all footage from your dash cam," Williams continued. "They've already got the video from her phone. They're also pulling your traffic stop data for the past 2 years. And they want to interview you. Should I talk to them?" "That's up to you. But I'd strongly suggest you call your union rep first. This is beyond me trying to handle it internally." Derek nodded numbly. "How bad is it?" Williams looked at him for a long moment. "You pulled over the one person in the entire state who has the authority to investigate police misconduct, and you treated her exactly like the kind of cop she was hired to find and remove from the force. How bad do you think it is?" "But I didn't know who she was." "That's the problem, Derek. It shouldn't matter who she was. You should treat every single person you pull over with the same professionalism and respect. That's the job." Derek wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, but the words wouldn't come, because deep down he knew Williams was right. He'd been cutting corners for years, getting away with things because most people didn't know their rights or were too scared to push back. He'd gotten comfortable with the power his badge gave him, comfortable enough to forget that it came with responsibilities too. "What happens now?" Derek asked quietly. "Now you go home. You don't talk to anyone about this case. You wait for your union rep to contact you, and you pray that this doesn't turn criminal." "Criminal?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "You detained someone without cause, Derek. You threatened an illegal search. Those are violations of civil rights. The FBI is involved. This could go federal." Derek felt like the floor was falling away beneath him. Federal charges. Prison time. Everything he'd worked for gone. His reputation destroyed. His pension probably forfeit. All because he'd pulled over the wrong woman and couldn't let his ego go. He stood up on shaky legs. "Can I at least clean out my locker?" "Make it quick." "And Derek, don't talk to anyone on your way out. No goodbyes, no explanations. Just get your stuff and go." Derek walked out of the office in a daze. The hallway seemed longer than before. He could feel eyes on him as he walked toward the locker room. Officers he'd worked with for years, suddenly very interested in their paperwork or their phones or anything that meant they didn't have to acknowledge him. In the locker room, Derek opened his locker and stared at the contents. Photos of his kids, a spare uniform, his coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Cop" that his daughter had given him for Christmas. Random junk accumulated over 6 years. He pulled out a plastic bag and started shoving things inside. Thompson walked in. He stopped when he saw Derek. "Hey," Thompson said awkwardly. "Hey, I heard about the administrative leave." Derek nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Thompson shifted his weight. "Look, man, I want you to know that I'm going to tell the truth when they interview me. About what I saw. I know. I'm not trying to throw you under the bus or anything, but what happened out there, it wasn't right." Derek turned to face him. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't realize I just destroyed my entire career because I couldn't swallow my pride for 5 minutes?" Thompson didn't have an answer for that. Derek closed his locker. "Tell me something. How many times have you seen me do stuff like this? How many times have you watched me push the line with traffic stops?" Thompson looked uncomfortable. "A few times." "And you never said anything. You're my training officer. You've been doing this for 6 years. I figured you knew what you were doing." "Yeah," Derek said bitterly. "I knew exactly what I was doing. I was abusing my authority and getting away with it because nobody called me on it." He picked up his bag. "Don't make the same mistakes I did, Thompson. Don't let the badge make you think you're above the rules. Don't treat people like they're guilty until proven innocent. And for the love of God, don't let your ego turn a routine traffic stop into a federal case." Derek walked out of the locker room, through the precinct, and out to the parking lot. He drove home in his personal car, the bag of belongings from his locker sitting on the passenger seat. When he pulled into his driveway, his wife's car was already there. She worked from home on Fridays, which meant she'd be inside wondering why he was home so early. He sat in the car for a few minutes, trying to figure out how to explain this. How do you tell your wife that you just lost your job, your career, possibly your freedom because you couldn't treat someone with basic human decency? His phone buzzed. An email notification. He opened it. It was from a local news station. Request for comment, officer involved in incident with Inspector General. They already had the story. Of course they did. By tomorrow morning, everyone would know. His name would be in the papers. The video would probably go viral. His kids would see it. His neighbors would see it. Everyone would know that Derek Mitchell was the cop who pulled over the Inspector General and treated her like a criminal. Another buzz. This time it was a text from his sister. "Just saw something on Facebook about you." "What's going on?" So it was already spreading on social media. Derek turned his phone face down on the seat and leaned his head back against the headrest. This was really happening. His world was really collapsing. The front door of his house opened and his wife stepped out, a concerned look on her face. She walked toward the car. Derek took a deep breath, opened the door, and stepped out to face the first of many difficult conversations. 3 days had passed since the traffic stop. 3 days that felt like 3 years to Derek Mitchell. He sat in his living room, laptop open, staring at the video that had been posted online. Someone had leaked it, probably someone from the IG's office, though it didn't really matter who. What mattered was that 4 million people had watched it in the past 48 hours. The comment section was brutal. "This is exactly why people don't trust cops. He's so confident until he realizes who she is. Priceless. Hope he loses his badge. Officers like this shouldn't be on the force. Imagine how many other people he's treated like this who weren't the Inspector General." That last comment hit Derek harder than the others, because it was true. The video showed him at his worst, but it wasn't some one-time mistake. It was just the first time he'd been caught. His phone rang. His union representative calling for the 3rd time that day. Derek answered. "I need you to come down to the office," the rep said. "We need to talk about your options." "Options?" Derek asked. "What options do I have?" "Not many," the rep admitted. "But we need to discuss them anyway. Can you be here in an hour?" Derek agreed and hung up. His wife was in the kitchen, deliberately making noise with dishes so she wouldn't have to talk to him. They'd had the conversation 3 days ago and it hadn't gone well. She'd cried. He'd cried. She'd asked him how he could have been so stupid. He hadn't had a good answer. An hour later, Derek sat across from his union rep in a small office downtown. The rep, a man named Patterson who'd been doing this for 20 years, looked tired. He pulled out a folder and opened it. "Okay," Patterson said. "Here's where we stand. The Inspector General's office has completed their preliminary investigation. They're recommending termination with cause, and can we fight it? We can try. But Derek, I'm going to be honest with you. The video is damning. Your traffic stop data is damning, and they found 12 other people willing to come forward with complaints about your conduct during traffic stops. Derek felt his chest tighten. 12? 12 that they've identified so far. Could be more. These are people who filed complaints that were dismissed by your sergeant. Now that the IG's office is reviewing everything, those complaints are getting a second look. What kind of complaints? Patterson pulled out another document. Let's see. 3 women saying you made inappropriate comments about their appearance. 5 people saying you detained them far longer than necessary without cause. 4 people saying you threatened searches without probable cause. 2 overlap between categories. He looked up. Ring any bells? Derek couldn't meet his eyes. He'd always told himself that those people were exaggerating, making mountains out of molehills. But now, seeing them all listed together, seeing the pattern, he couldn't deny it anymore. There's more, Patterson continued. The FBI has opened their own investigation. They're looking into whether your conduct constitutes a pattern of civil rights violations. If they decide to prosecute, you're looking at federal charges. How much time? Could be anywhere from probation to 5 years, depending on what they charge you with and what they can prove. Patterson closed the folder. Derek, the union will represent you. That's our job, but I need you to understand how serious this is. This isn't just about losing your job. This is about potentially going to prison. Derek nodded slowly. What do you think I should do? Honestly, I think you should resign before they fire you. At least that way you control the narrative a little bit. You can say you're taking responsibility for your actions. It might help if the federal charges move forward. Shows remorse, shows you're accepting consequences. But then I lose my pension. You're probably going to lose it anyway. And if you fight the termination and lose, which you almost certainly will, it goes on your record as being fired for cause. No chance of ever working in law enforcement again. Not that you'd have much chance anyway after this. Derek sat in silence for a long moment. 6 years of his life gone. The career he'd trained for, worked for, built his identity around, finished. All because he'd let power go to his head and forgotten that the badge was supposed to mean something more than authority. It was supposed to mean service. I'll resign, Derek said quietly. Patterson nodded. I'll draft the letter. We'll submit it by Monday. By the time Derek got home, the sun was setting. His wife was sitting on the couch, her own laptop open. She closed it quickly when he walked in, but not before he saw what she'd been looking at. Job listings. She was already preparing for the financial hit they were about to take. How did it go? She asked. I'm resigning, she nodded. They'd talked about this possibility. What about the FBI investigation? Still ongoing. Patterson thinks it'll be a few months before they decide whether to charge me. And if they do, then I might go to prison. His wife's eyes filled with tears again. How did this happen, Derek? How did we get here? Derek sat down beside her. I got comfortable. I forgot that being a cop means serving people, not controlling them. I let the power go to my head, he paused. And I never thought I'd get caught. You shouldn't have had to worry about getting caught, she said. You should have been doing the right thing all along. I know. Meanwhile, across town, Maya Chen sat in her office reviewing documents. It had been a long 3 days for her as well, though in a different way. The video had caused exactly the kind of public outcry she'd expected, but it had also accelerated conversations that needed to happen. Agent Rodriguez sat across from her. We've identified a pattern, Rodriguez said. Officer Mitchell wasn't the only one. His sergeant was covering for at least 4 other officers who show similar behavior patterns. The whole precinct needs a serious overhaul. Maya nodded. How many complaints total? 67 over the past 3 years. All dismissed or minimally investigated. All involving the same 5 officers and the same sergeant. That's a systemic failure. That's what makes this federal. It's not just individual officers having bad days. It's an institutional pattern of civil rights violations. Maya leaned back in her chair. What's your recommendation? We move forward with the investigation. We interview all 67 complainants. We review every traffic stop those 5 officers made in the past 3 years. And we build cases not just against the officers, but against the sergeant, and potentially the precinct leadership for failing to address the pattern. It was a massive undertaking. Months of work, dozens of interviews, mountains of data to analyze. But it was necessary. That's what Maya had been hired to do. Not to punish individual officers, but to fix broken systems. Do it, Maya said. And Rodriguez? I want this done right. By the book. No shortcuts. If we're going to hold officers accountable, we need to be beyond reproach ourselves. Over the following weeks, the story continued to unfold. Derek's resignation was accepted. The video had been viewed over 10 million times. Local news stations ran segments about police accountability. Community groups organized forums about their experiences with law enforcement. And slowly, painfully, things began to change. The precinct implemented new policies. All traffic stops now required detailed documentation of the reason for the stop, the duration, and any searches or detentions. Dashboard cameras became mandatory for all patrol cars, with footage automatically uploaded to a secure server that the IG's office could access. Officers received mandatory training on implicit bias and constitutional rights. And a civilian review board was established to examine complaints independently. Were the changes perfect? No. Were they enough? Probably not. But they were a start. 2 months after the traffic stop, the FBI concluded their investigation. Derek was charged with 2 counts of deprivation of rights under color of law. The charges carried a maximum sentence of 3 years. With his cooperation in the broader investigation and his resignation from the force, he eventually pleaded guilty to 1 count and received 18 months probation and 200 hours of community service. He lost his pension. He lost his career. He lost the respect of his colleagues and his community. But he avoided prison. The other 4 officers identified in the investigation faced similar fates. 2 resigned. 2 were fired. The sergeant was demoted and transferred, and the precinct slowly and painfully began to rebuild its relationship with the community it served. Officer Thompson, the young cop who'd witnessed Derek's traffic stop, took a different path. He became an advocate for reform within the department. He spoke at training sessions about the importance of intervening when fellow officers crossed lines. He worked with community groups to improve communication between police and citizens. And he tried, in his own small way, to be the kind of officer the community deserved. As for Maya Chen, she continued her work. The traffic stop that could have ended her day in frustration instead became a catalyst for change. Not just in one precinct, but across the state. Other departments saw what happened and implemented their own reforms, not wanting to be the next viral scandal. She still drove the same car. Still had the same inspection receipt in her glove compartment. Still remembered standing on that sidewalk for 35 minutes while Derek Mitchell let his ego destroy his career. But she didn't think about it with anger or satisfaction. She thought about it as a reminder of why her job mattered, because for every Derek Mitchell who got caught on video, there were a dozen others who never did. For every person who knew their rights and could assert them, there were 100 who didn't or couldn't. For every traffic stop that went viral, there were thousands that happened in the dark, unrecorded and unaccountable. That's what needed to change. Not just punishing the bad officers, but building systems that prevented abuse in the first place. Systems that valued service over power. Systems that treated every person with dignity, regardless of whether they happened to be the Inspector General or just someone trying to get home after a long day.